The day I opened my mailbox and saw a bright red envelope stamped, "Final Notice, $10,000 fine," I honestly thought it was some kind of twisted joke. $10,000. For planting flowers. Not for building a second story. Not for tearing down a fence. Not for blasting music at 3 a.m. Flowers. Roses. That's when I realized this was never about landscaping. It was about power. And if they wanted a war over petals and soil, they were about to learn how deep roots can grow. I moved into Maple Ridge Estates 3 years ago, a picture-perfect suburban neighborhood with matching beige homes, spotless sidewalks, and lawns cut so evenly they looked like green carpeting. It felt safe. Predictable. The kind of place where nothing dramatic ever happened. Of course, it came with a homeowners association, like most neighborhoods there. At first, the HOA was background noise, monthly newsletters reminding us about approved mailbox finishes, trash bin placement rules, and how high grass could grow before it became a violation. I paid my dues. Followed the rules. Kept to myself. Then spring arrived, and with it, a weight I had been carrying since my mother passed away the previous year. She had loved gardening. Her backyard had been her sanctuary, rows of tulips, walls of lavender, and her pride and joy, deep red roses. She used to say roses bloom best after a harsh winter because they fight for it. So I planted 10 rose bushes along the front border of my yard. Neatly arranged. Symmetrical. Classic red and white blooms against fresh black mulch. Nothing wild. Nothing outrageous. Just beautiful. The first morning they bloomed, I felt something shift inside me. It was the first time grief didn't feel suffocating. Neighbors walking by complimented them. Some even stopped to take pictures. It felt good. Healing. Then the first letter arrived, notice of violation, unauthorized landscaping modification. Unauthorized. I reread it 3 times. I reread it 3 times. According to Section 14.3b of the HOA Guidelines, any substantial aesthetic modification required prior written approval. I had apparently committed a procedural crime. I emailed the board politely, attached photos, explained everything. No response. 2 weeks later, another letter. $250 fine for noncompliance. That's when I attended my first HOA meeting. Folding chairs in a community center room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. 5 board members sitting behind a plastic table like a jury panel. In the center sat Harold Whitmore, the HOA president. Late 60s. Crisp polo shirt tucked into pressed khakis. Silver hair combed with mathematical precision. Permanent expression of mild disappointment. When they called my name, I calmly explained that the roses were tasteful and aligned with neighborhood aesthetics. A few neighbors nodded subtly. I thought reason might win. Whitmore adjusted his glasses and said, "The issue is not beauty. It is procedure. You bypassed protocol." Protocol. For roses. He offered to waive the fine if I removed them within 14 days. I pictured my mother's garden. The mornings she spent pruning, humming softly. I felt something settle in my chest. "I won't be removing them," I said. The room went silent. And that's when the war began. If you were me, what would you do in this $10,000 fine for planting flowers, my sweet revenge situation? Comment below, because at that moment, I still believed it would resolve rationally. It didn't. Fines escalated. $250 became $500. Then $1,000. Late fees piled on. Each letter colder than the last. I requested an appeal hearing. They postponed it twice. Meanwhile, I started noticing things. Neighbors who once waved now avoided eye contact. One whispered that Whitmore had become obsessed with enforcement after barely winning re-election to the board. I caught him one afternoon standing near my yard with a measuring tape. Measuring my flower bed. Documenting violation scale, he said without looking at me. Apparently, my roses exceeded acceptable frontage percentage. I laughed at first. Then the certified letter came. Accumulated fines, $4,750. Failure to pay within 60 days would result in a lien on my property. A lien. Over flowers. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I researched HOA law in my state. I read forums, case studies, legal precedents. And I learned something important: HOAs must enforce rules uniformly. Selective enforcement can invalidate penalties entirely. So I started documenting everything. Every letter. Every delay. Every time Whitmore stepped onto my property line without notice. I requested meeting minutes and approval records from the past 2 years. That's when I found it. A board member had installed a stone fountain in his front yard without approval. No fine. Another painted her door navy blue, a color not listed in the approved palette. No violation notice. Selective enforcement. Meanwhile, my fines climbed. $6,200. $7,800. The tension in the neighborhood grew thick. Some neighbors quietly told me they admired my stand. One confessed she'd been fined for leaving a holiday wreath up 3 days too long. Then came the final envelope. Total due, $10,000. Payment required within 30 days or foreclosure proceedings would begin. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. They had overplayed their hand. If you've watched this far, you know this wasn't going to end with me digging up roses in defeat. This is where the sweet revenge truly began. That I hired an attorney specializing in HOA litigation. When he reviewed the documentation, his expression shifted from curiosity to interest to something almost amused. "They fined you $10,000 for flowers?" he asked. I nodded. Then I showed him the evidence of selective enforcement. He leaned back and said, "They just handed you leverage. We sent a formal demand letter challenging the fines based on discriminatory enforcement and procedural violations. We requested internal communications, enforcement logs, and financial records under state HOA transparency laws." Suddenly, the board's tone changed. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread. My attorney attended with me. Whitmore looked less confident than before. My attorney calmly presented the evidence: unapproved fountain with no penalty. Unauthorized paint color ignored. Failure to provide proper appeal process timelines. Unauthorized property measurements without notice. The room buzzed. Neighbors started whispering louder. Then came the final blow. My attorney revealed that by threatening foreclosure over a disputed fine without completing a legally compliant appeal process, the HOA had violated state statutes. Not only could the fines be dismissed, but the association could be liable for legal fees. Whitmore's face drained of color. Within 2 weeks, the board voted to rescind all fines. All $10,000 erased. But that wasn't enough for me. Remember, this was about more than money. With support from several neighbors who had grown tired of intimidation tactics, we petitioned for a special board election. Turnout was the highest Maple Ridge Estates had ever seen. Whitmore lost his presidency. 3 new members were elected on a platform of transparency and reasonable enforcement. Policies were revised. Approval processes simplified. And selective enforcement rules clarified. My roses? They stayed exactly where they were. That summer, they bloomed brighter than ever. Neighbors who once avoided me now stopped to chat again. Some even planted flowers of their own. It turned out I wasn't the only one who felt suffocated by silent control. The $10,000 fine for planting flowers, my sweet revenge, wasn't about destruction. It wasn't about tearing anything down. It was about standing firm long enough for the truth to surface. Roses bloom best after harsh winters. My mother was right. And every time I water them now, I smile knowing those 10 bushes didn't just survive, they changed the entire neighborhood. So tell me, if an HOA tried to fine you $10,000 for planting flowers, would you fight back, or would you dig them up? If you believe in standing up to unfair power, hit like, subscribe to Retribune, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't ripping something out by the roots, it's letting it bloom for everyone to see.